Thank you for joining us. My name is Chris Myers. I'm Director of Federal Affairs for the States Trust Project at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thank you for joining us for our special shutdown edition. We've just begun the federal government shutdown here, and we wanted to be able to take this opportunity to help folks understand kind of what the shutdown is, what's causing it, what we can expect, and hopefully how we can come out of this better than we've come into it. And so to have that discussion, we've brought Brittany Madni here to talk with us today. She's Executive Vice President at the Economic Policy Innovation Center, EPIC, as they like to call it, and has been doing a lot of work, both as her own work and the organization as a whole have been doing a lot of work on these issues, and going to help us walk through what's happening. Like I said, what kinds of things can we expect to come out of this, and hopefully how we can get out of this, and even have a discussion about how state leadership can use this opportunity and avoid some of the pitfalls that they might be able to run into, but also kind of engage and hopefully maybe even push this to its fruition so that they can start doing the work at the state level that we at States Trust thinks makes the real difference in making sure that we are expressing laws and regulations and other things that they need to do to make sure that we engage in a free and prosperous society. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Just to start off, if you can give us a kind of the probably the hardest part of this is give us a quick overview of where we are and how we got here.
Tough one. But you know what? It seems harder than it is. It's actually very simple. We're in a government shutdown because congressional Democrats have decided that they would rather prioritize a handful of highly expensive policies that add up to another $1.5 trillion in debt for the American people over a short-term agreement to keep the government operating during negotiations for full-year funding. That's what we're doing right now. We're in that shutdown period. The government shut down last night at midnight. The clock struck and down the rabbit hole we went. The important context here, Chris, is that when we're talking about a government shutdown, we're really only talking about 27% of the government's operations, of the government's funding. We're just talking about a small portion. That doesn't mean the impacts aren't significant. They absolutely are, but there is a little bit more to the story than you may think.
So how is this similar or dissimilar to ones that have happened in the past, maybe? Is this, it seems like the Senate majority is willing to negotiate on some of these things, but not using this as an opportunity to do that. Mm-hmm. Is this kind of being leveraged in the same way as it has been in the past, or is this a little different?
It's a little different for a few reasons. The first reason is, in some of the more recent shutdowns, Republicans have been the primary, I don't want to say instigator, but the primary force behind the shutdown. They were the ones who were opposing moving forward with whatever the deal was that was on the table. Now, Republicans are not the driving force. Republicans have actually already advanced what's known as a clean CR, a clean continuing resolution, at the last approved funding levels, which, by the way, were under Joe Biden.
This is just keeping the status quo.
Keeping the status quo. Meanwhile, it's the Democrats who are looking to add policies to the conversation that are not part of a normal funding negotiation. So that is different because it is a little bit of a reversal in roles here. Now, what's similar is that typically it is the party that is pushing the shutdown, that is voting against keeping the government open, that ends up being the party without a ton of leverage. And that's what we're seeing right now. Congressional Democrats don't have a lot of leverage because their asks are frankly unserious.
So EPIC has kind of come out with some policy briefs that have kind of provided its own description of what a shutdown is. Kind of dig into kind of what you guys call the shutdown.
Yeah, so we colloquially talk about it as a shutdown as shorthand for what's happening right now. But at EPIC, we really think that a more accurate, precise description would be a temporary lapse in non-essential government operations. And non-essential government operations is the key phrase there. We're looking at just operations programs within the government that are deemed non-essential. So during a shutdown, what is precipitating this is a lapse in appropriations, a gap in funding for government programs. But because this is only 27% of the actual government, anything that's not in that sort of normal discretionary appropriations process is still operating. That leaves us with 73% of the federal government operating. The other thing here is that the administration has the ability to designate between essential versus non-essential operations. Essential operations are things like the military, the air traffic controllers. Those individuals who are all government employees are still operating. They unfortunately just don't get a paycheck during the shutdown.
I remember during a previous shutdown here in Washington, they did things like fencing off the World War II memorial so that veterans couldn't go outside and kind of do their fly-ins where they do their memorial services for their other fallen veterans from World War II. It seemed kind of like a ridiculous application of the discretion that you would have in shutting things down. Can we expect something similar to that this time, or is it?
I think it'll be a little different. So I know exactly what you're referring to. There was a lot of criticism when that happened, and President Obama was particularly infamous for making these decisions. President Trump, on the other hand, has made it clear that he is trying to impose the least harm possible on the average American citizen. Instead, he's going to direct any of the impacts that he can direct toward government employees. He would rather the government take the brunt of the impact than the normal working American who's trying to go about their business. Now, that doesn't mean they won't be impacted, but it does mean you probably won't see stunts like people putting up guardrails against veterans accessing the World War II memorial. That's not necessary. That was a choice that was made under that administration.
Right. So, what kind of policies should we avoid as this plays out, other than kind of bringing undue harm and unnecessary political pressure for just for a show's sake? What other kinds of things should we try to avoid as we kind of progress if this goes 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks?
Yeah, there's a lot that we should avoid. I think the important question here is, what should we hold on to, right? So it's not just what do we want to not do. We don't want to do a lot of these sort of showy things to make it seem like a bigger deal than it is. We want to keep it simple. We want the American people to understand there's an opportunity to keep the government funded at current levels during a 7-week negotiation period. That's all we're talking about, Chris. 7 weeks. 7 weeks, we're going to have this conversation again. We can't even get to that consensus right now. So it's really about, what do we hold on to? And we hold on to that simple argument. We cannot allow this to get more complicated than it is. That's the answer. It's just, we need 5 more Democrats in the United States Senate to decide to join with Republicans and a handful of their Democrat colleagues already, and make a choice to continue a productive negotiation while the government is operating. If we don't have that, then the government will continue to be shut down. I do not see Republicans, particularly the administration and Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune, caving to the demands.
So with regards to kind of keeping up with the kind of consistent messaging and avoiding the largest problems, do you think there are any other opportunities that the administration can avail themselves of? Any things that they can do while this is going on and while those negotiations are going on that could be positive policy developments?
So one thing that's been discussed a lot is the idea of using the shutdown to employ something called RIFs. These are reductions in force. And it's a way to make determinations about lowering the total size and scope of government, removing portions of the federal workforce. So you're not technically firing individual people, you are eliminating their positions. And that's why it's called a reduction in force, right? It's a reduction in the federal workforce overall.
It's not towards individual positions, but
correct. It's a comprehensive review overall. It lists individual positions, but it is more about we no longer need someone in this chair, it doesn't really matter who was in the chair. So you're not firing a person. And the value of that is that we would just have more limited government because government would be smaller. Now, how this relates to a shutdown is twofold. It is a separate process from the furlough process if a federal employee is furloughed. That just means they're non-essential. They're not allowed to work during the shutdown. The RIF would be a secondary notice that an individual could receive if the administration chooses to continue down this policy pathway. And that would basically say, hey, you've now been identified as being in a position that's not necessary. We know it's not necessary because the government has been operating without you for X number of days during the shutdown. So there is a real opportunity here for Russ Vought, the director of the OMB, to advance some of his own priorities, namely through RIFs and sort of shrinking, redesignating, reprioritizing the federal government's focus overall. And that's a risk to the Democrats because they'd like to avoid that more than anything. So this gamble could backfire on them.
Right. So at States Trust, we like to focus on how states can be primary leaders in enacting government policy. What kind of practical steps do you think that states and state leaderships can take for contingency planning, for fiscal prudence on their end to be able to kind of weather any shocks that might come to their finances?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the big one in a minute. But just for practical steps first, states, local governments alike should prepare for a slowdown, pause, non-responsiveness from federal partners on certain projects. So, for example, if you are a state working with maybe the ag department on grants for local community development, rural community development, things of that nature, I would anticipate having a lapse in that conversation. Those are the sorts of things, grants, back and forth with regulators, things of that nature. Those are the things that are likely to be paused during a shutdown. So if states are planning on moving forward with highway projects or something of that nature with the DOT, expect to and plan for a delay in those projects. That might precipitate the need to have your own state legislators meet if they need to adjust timings on different project deliveries, get allowances transferred from one account to another to cover balances that may be needed while you're waiting for federal funds to come through. Things of that nature should certainly be started now. I would not wait on that subject. The longest shutdown in history was 35 days. I don't hope that that's the case that we're going to experience now, but it's certainly a possibility. Now, the bigger question here, and I think this is what you're getting at, is how do we even avoid being in this position to begin with as states? Rely on the federal budget less?
Yeah.
The more states are self-sufficient, the less impact federal catastrophes on the budgeting side will have on your own budget. If you don't need federal taxpayer dollars to balance your budget, well, that means you're not reliant and freaking out when the federal taxpayer dollars stop flowing in.
Right. So ask you to put on your kind of Nostradamus hat. Where do you see this going? What do you think, how do you think this is going to continue to kind of play out? Are we in for 35 days? Are we in for 2 weeks? What kind of expectations, given what you're hearing on the Hill and from kind of other organizations that are dealing with this issue, what do you expect to happen?
Well, let me check my watch here. So we're recording this in the 11 o'clock hour, Chris.
I think we're about 11 hours in at this point.
And we're 11 hours in, and there's an ongoing vote while we're recording on the Senate floor. So whatever I say might be totally wrong by the time
it might not even make it through the editing of this podcast.
It might not even make it to the editing. But my prediction here is that it's not going to be Republicans either in Congress or the White House that fold. I really think it's going to be the Democrats who have to come to terms with the fact that they are not in control. They might have this limited ability to block advancement, but they do not have the numbers to get what they're asking for. The House has already passed a CR. That means that is the principal policy right now that is likely to advance.
Status quo.
That's the status quo, which is also the status quo in funding levels. Yes. Now, adding to that, the bill that they advanced is very clean. It's simply carrying forward the funding levels that Democrats voted for 13 times and that were enacted in March 2024. Who was the president in March 2024? It was President Biden.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult set of facts that Chuck Schumer will have to wrangle his caucus on. Every day that the government is shut down, the more difficult it's going to be for Democrats to decide not to do something that they've already done. The question is whether or not that is prolonged beyond the week, beyond 2 weeks, etc. That's the decision point. You're not going to see a cave from the other side because there's nothing to give. There is nothing to give. We're not talking about a cut in top line spending right now, which is, by the way, what most House Republicans actually want. This is just to get negotiations going. And so if you're thinking through, okay, well, how long could this go? I think it's until you have a handful of senators who are expected to retire who decide to flip their vote, because there's just not a lot in it for them to keep going.
Right. So kind of going out, hopefully when we get past this moment in time, you've got some of the issues that Democrats are trying to hold out now. You would kind of generally expect that they're probably going to be the ones that fold in this scenario to a large extent. What are some of those mechanisms that they're holding out on that we should be concerned about going forward, that they're still going to be trying to leverage another opportunity as it comes down the road?
Yeah.
Some of those components that they're saying, hey, this is where we want to negotiate, and where we should be cautious about giving them other opportunities
sort
to
of
pursue.
Pieces of their demands list.
Yes.
Yeah. So DeLauro and Murray, who are the top-ranking Democrats on the House and Senate Appropriations Committees, respectively, released a $1.5 trillion alternative CR package. That gives us a list of everything that they want, and we've got an approximate cost for that. Epic's actually, who did the original analysis on that bill that the White House has been citing. We know that sort of the most expensive topics within that list are on healthcare issues. The first one is rolling back all of the Medicaid reforms that were in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
So the bill we just passed.
Well, we just passed, arguably the hallmark legislation of the president's term. They would like to undo all of that. So this is why you aren't going to see congressional Republicans bending to that demand. They just passed it. They just saw this signed into law on the 4th of July. They have no interest in undoing what they just voted for. Those specific demands include a handful of Medicaid reforms, not cuts, reforms. And this is really important because the Medicaid program is still expected to grow every single year for the entirety of the budget window, which is 10 years. So the idea that they're cuts is a misnomer. What the reforms do is fix some financing gimmicks that allow states to take advantage of federal taxpayers instead of putting their own skin in the game. It requires work requirements or imposes work requirements for able-bodied working-age adults on Medicaid. So if you're a 38-year-old man who's sitting at home on his computer playing video games, collecting Medicaid, that's not going to fly anymore. You actually have to go to work. And that definition is quite flexible. In fact, it's work, school, volunteering, demonstrating that you want to work and are trying to find a job actively. Lots of ways to fill that requirement. So they'd like to undo that work requirement. One of the reasons that's so important, by the way, Chris, as an aside, is that is going to make sure that the Medicaid program is focused on America's most vulnerable. The poor children of the country who obviously can't go to work, and then the disabled who need extra support. That's who the program's designed for, the people who can't work.
Yeah, so preserving those resources
Preserving
for the people
it for
that
them.
need it.
Exactly. And then, of course, the big one that everyone's talking about is the reform that made sure illegal immigrants cannot get Medicaid benefits. Now, this is a little weird because Democrats have been saying for years that illegal immigrants don't have Medicaid benefits. But now they're upset that they don't have Medicaid benefits under OB3.
Seems like they're talking out of both sides there.
A little weird. How can you be mad that the benefits were taken away if a year ago you said they didn't have them? So they would like to see illegal immigrants' benefits on Medicaid restored. That's, again, highly unpopular, not just with congressional Republicans and the administration, but with the American people. So those are the main Medicaid reforms, and those are quite expensive. And then you also have the fight on Obamacare, and in particular, the plus-ups on something that we're calling COVID credits. That could cost us $410 billion to continue a COVID-era program that gives subsidies from the federal government to insurance companies.
And this was designed as a COVID-era program.
It was
This was not designed as a regular part of Obamacare.
Correct. But Obamacare is incredibly expensive because of its design. Now, people get confused about that because it seems like their premiums aren't that high. So how is this so expensive? Well, it's because the premiums are being subsidized on the back end. You probably don't even know that you're getting a subsidy. And that's because you're not the one getting a subsidy. The federal government is taking money from the Treasury through the Obamacare system and sending it straight from the Treasury to the insurance company. So the insurance company is using that money for supposedly overhead coverage of higher risk pools, etc. I don't get too nerdy on the healthcare side, but the insurance company is who's getting that money. Well, as healthcare continues to get more and more expensive and the wheels start coming off of Obamacare, the insurance companies are saying that they want more money to be able to do Obamacare because Obamacare is too expensive.
The premiums won't be able to cover the
premiums won't be able to cover the costs of the services. Okay, well, that isn't really about pushing down premiums. That's about pushing the costs from the premiums to the taxpayer instead of from the consumer. So you're still paying for it. You're just now paying for it with debt. Now, the specific program that they want to extend is the COVID plus up of that. So you had the normal premiums, and you were eligible for those premium subsidies for your insurer up to 400% of the poverty line under normal Obamacare. Under the COVID plus up, the size of the premium subsidy increased, and they removed the cap. It's unlimited.
So 5 years later, we're still running on this emergency funding, or we were running on this emergency funding
we're still running on it. This program, well, to your point, it's going to expire. It's expiring at the end of this year, end of the calendar year, not the fiscal year. So it expires at the end of the calendar year in December, and health insurance companies, anticipating that, have already sent out their premium notices for the next year showing what the costs of their plans are going to be, because you have to be able to enroll before the year starts. And those plans are showing an increase. Well, it's not that the plans have gotten more expensive. It's that the wool that's been pulled over consumers' eyes is being removed.
Yes.
And so now, God forbid, the American people would see the actual cost of Obamacare without
hiding it under government subsidies, which is
right, exactly, without these extra plus-ups. And don't forget, like, the regular premium subsidies will still stay there under the continuing resolution as written. We don't even turn off under the continuing resolution the plus-up COVID subsidies. We just let them expire because they were written to already expire because the pandemic is well past its time.
Wow. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have here for today, but I'd like to thank Brittany for kind of going over the situation as it's playing out now. Like we said, this shutdown might be over by the time this podcast
We
airs.
can hope.
We can hope. But if it's not, we hope you guys got a better understanding of what the issues at play are and what they're going to continue to be down the road, because a lot of these fights over these specific policies that we've talked about, they're going to continue on. And so state lawmakers and organizations that are geared on trying to make sure that they're advocating for the right policies, understanding these issues are really an important part of that. So thank you for listening. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us at States Trust or at Texas Public Policy Foundation. And until next time, thank you.